the world of televised talent competitions, very few contestants have the audacity to look in the eye and reject a life-changing offer. But in 2012, a shy teenager in a baggy hoodie did exactly that. The narrative of reality television is frequently built on total submission to the experts, but Jonathan's debut shattered the standard operating procedure. When he walked onto the stage, he was immediately categorized as an underdog, a visual mismatch for the polished pop world. But the story that unfolded wasn't just about a surprising voice. It was about a psychological standoff between an industry mogul used to absolute control and a young man who refused to sell his soul for a record deal. This report explores the specific moment Jonathan the Machine, the dark history he was escaping, and the decade-long transformation that eventually proved he was right all along. We dive deep into the specific ultimatum that shocked the nation and why his refusal remains iconic. To truly understand why Jonathan was so defensive on that stage, we must first examine the investigative reports regarding his life before the cameras, a history of mistreatment that nearly silenced him forever. Before he was a household name, Jonathan was a student at West Hatch High School, where he became the primary target of severe and relentless bullying. Sources confirm that this wasn't merely schoolyard teasing. It was a sustained campaign of psychological harassment focused on his weight. The intensity of this treatment reportedly led to a complete breakdown in his confidence, forcing him to withdraw from the school system entirely to protect his mental well-being. Jonathan has since described this period as inhabiting the darkest of places. While we must avoid direct terms for sensitive topics, it is documented that Jonathan was battling internal demons that brought him to the brink of a permanent decision. This context is critical because it highlights that he wasn't just battling nerves. He was fighting against years of conditioning that told him he was worthless. While the audience saw a singing duo, the reality was far more complex. Charlotte wasn't just a partner. She was the human shield that allowed Jonathan to face the world again. The partnership between Jonathan and Charlotte was not a random pairing. Their singing teacher recognized that Jonathan's trauma was so deep that he could not stand on a stage alone. Charlotte became his psychological anchor, providing the stability he needed to step back into a society that had previously rejected him. This dependency was often misinterpreted as a lack of individual talent, but investigative context reveals it was a necessary survival tactic. Charlotte navigated the social minefields for him, allowing Jonathan to focus solely on the music that saved him. Without her presence, it is highly likely that the world would never have heard his voice. This bond was forged in the fire of shared struggle, making the later attempt by industry executives to separate them even more calculated and cold-blooded than it appeared on the television broadcast. The archival footage of the 2012 audition serves as a damning indictment of the entertainment industry's superficiality, capturing the exact moment prejudice clouded the judgment of the world's most famous scout. Upon reviewing the tape, the immediate bias in the room is undeniable. As Jonathan walked onto the stage, the visual contrast to the standard, polished contestant was stark. Clad in a loose t-shirt and ill-fitting sweatpants, his appearance triggered an instant negative reaction. The camera cuts show leaning back in his chair, exhaling sharply with a look of resigned skepticism. The audience, taking cues from the judges, can be heard snickering. This phenomenon highlights how quickly value is assigned based on aesthetics rather than ability. However, the narrative shifted violently the moment the prayer began. Audio analysis confirms that Jonathan's vocal delivery was technically flawless, possessing a tenor richness usually developed over decades. The transformation in the room was physical. The collective mockery evaporated instantly, replaced by a stunned silence. What transpired next was a classic display of industry ruthlessness, as attempted to execute a divide-and-conquer strategy that would have destroyed a friendship for the sake of profit. Following the performance, the feedback took a sharp turn. While other judges offered praise, focused on what he perceived as the commercial liability. In a move typical for high-stakes artist management, publicly proposed that Jonathan ditch Charlotte. His statement, "Jonathan, you are a huge star," was followed by the implication that Charlotte would only act as an anchor. We must analyze the sheer pressure of this moment. This was a televised ultimatum delivered to a fragile 17-year-old boy in front of millions. The proposition was clear. Betray the person who gave you the confidence to sing, and I will give you fame. From a cold business perspective, was looking at the bottom line. Solo acts are historically easier to market. Was essentially handing Jonathan a winning lottery ticket, but the price of admission was his integrity and his only true support system. In a twist that every convention of reality television, Jonathan's response to the industry titan wasn't submission. It was a defiant defense of loyalty that forced a public retraction. Jonathan's reaction to the ultimatum remains one of the most significant moments in the show's history. Without consulting his parents or pausing for effect, he immediately rejected the premise of his offer. His statement, "We came here as a duo, we're gonna stay here as a duo," was delivered with a quiet firmness. This was a critical juncture. By refusing to abandon Charlotte, Jonathan signaled that his personal values outweighed commercial success. This decision could have cost him his spot in the competition, yet it had the opposite effect. It endeared him to the British public, who saw a level of integrity rarely displayed on such programs. The narrative arc concluded in the semifinals, where was forced to issue a rare on-air apology. He admitted that sticking with Charlotte was the best decision Jonathan ever made, a moment of total vindication for the young tenor. Despite the victory of loyalty in 2012, critics resurfaced 2 years later when the duo announced their separation, claiming this was proof that had been right all along. In 2014, news broke that Jonathan and Charlotte were officially parting ways. This announcement triggered a wave of "I told you so" commentary from skeptics who believed the split validated its initial assessment. However, investigative context is required here to correct the record. The split was not acrimonious. The duo had already released 2 highly successful albums, both of which achieved gold certification. The decision to split was reported as mutual, stemming from a desire to explore different creative directions rather than a lack of success. Music recognized that both artists had matured enough to stand alone. Crucially, Jonathan waited until they had achieved success together, ensuring that Charlotte also had a platform and a career before they moved on. Therefore, the split did not prove right. It proved that Jonathan's timing was superior, navigating the industry with a moral compass. While the tabloids focused on his music and his weight, Jonathan was privately grappling with a neurological reality that went undiagnosed for decades, finally coming to light in 2022. For years, fans speculated about Jonathan's unique mannerisms and his visible discomfort during interviews. It wasn't until 2022, at age 27, that Jonathan revealed he had received a formal diagnosis of autism. This revelation provided a new lens through which to view his audition. The sensory overload of the loud audience and intense scrutiny would have been exponentially more difficult for someone on the spectrum. It also explains his deep attachment to Charlotte. She wasn't just a singer. She was a safe person who helped ground him in a chaotic environment. The diagnosis highlighted that his refusal to split from her was likely a necessary coping mechanism as much as a moral stance. Understanding this neurodivergence adds a layer of heroism to his journey. He was navigating a high-stimulus industry that is notoriously unfriendly to neurodivergent individuals, all while undiagnosed and without support. Recent footage of the tenor reveals a physical metamorphosis so drastic that it has dominated headlines, signaling that Jonathan has finally taken full control of his health and his future. If you were to look at a side-by-side comparison of Jonathan from 2012 and the man performing today, you would be forgiven for thinking they were 2 different people. Reports confirm that in recent years, Jonathan has committed to a rigorous health regime that has resulted in the loss of over 70 pounds. Unlike many celebrity transformations driven by vanity, Jonathan has been vocal that this change was driven by discipline and mental health management. He credits walking 10,000 steps a day and a complete overhaul of his diet as the key factors. This physical glow-up is symbolic of his internal shift. He has moved from the broken teenager who felt he had no future to a chart-topping solo artist who commands the stage with confidence. Currently, Jonathan is a force in the classical crossover genre, recording at prestigious locations like Abbey Road Studios and proving that he didn't just survive the spotlight, he mastered it. Ultimately, the story of Jonathan is not just about a voice that surprised the world, but about the triumph of human integrity over corporate ruthlessness in an age of manufactured fame. Jonathan didn't just win a spot in a talent show. He won a moral victory that is still discussed over a decade later. He demonstrated that it is possible to navigate the cutthroat waters of the music industry without sacrificing one's character. Looked at a book cover and saw a risk. The world opened the book and found a hero. As Jonathan continues to fill concert halls on his own terms, he serves as a permanent reminder that the people who try to silence you are usually the ones who are most afraid of your voice. His journey from a bullied student in a hoodie to a self-aware superstar is the ultimate rebuttal to every skeptic who ever doubted him. It makes one wonder how many other great voices are lost simply because they didn't have the strength to say no to the machine. Jonathan remains a legendary figure, not just for his singing, but for his courage.